to order. It is Monday, March 13th, 2023, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, on June 16th, 2021, former Governor Charles Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until March 31st, 2023, of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order. Therefore, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation from the board, and I grant permission to Westwood Media Center to record the meeting and would ask if there is anyone else wishing to record the meeting. If you would do so by raising your hand or putting something in the Q&A. Seeing none, we're going to jump into the chair's update. We're going to start with the annual town election. Just some key dates. The election will be held on Tuesday, April 25th. The last day to object to or withdraw nomination papers is March 23rd, 2023. On April 14th, that's the last day to register voters for the annual town election and annual town meeting. And April 18th is the last day to apply for absentee or vote by mail ballots. And then April 18th is the last day to post the warrant for the annual town election and the annual town meeting. Early voting in person will be held at the Westwood Police Station in the Gillette Meeting Room on the following dates and times. April 14th from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. and on April 15th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. There are a number of candidates for the various offices. You can find them on the website. And Dottie, I see that you are in attendance. Is there anything that you want to add before I move on?
I just brought Dottie in.
Oh, sorry.
I brought her in. Here she is.
Dottie, I think you heard everything. Did I miss anything?
I did. Nope. Thank you very much. You covered everything pretty well.
Excellent.
So I think
Thank you.
the main thing is just we want to get people out to vote, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. So thank you for giving a good rundown. Excellent.
All right. Next up on the agenda, March is Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month, and we have someone who brought this to our attention here in attendance, Carolyn, and I hope I don't mess up your last name, Miazga. Is that correct? Am I saying that correctly? Tish, have we let Carolyn in?
She's in.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
All right. Well, according to the CDC, there's approximately 3 million people impacted with bleeding disorders nationwide, and it's estimated that over 30,000 people live with hemophilia here in the U.S. The most common bleeding disorder is von Willebrand disease, and both hemophilia and VWB, which is the von Willebrand disease, they're rare. Bleeding disorders share the inability to form proper blood clots and are characterized by an extended bleeding both internally and externally after injury, surgery, trauma, menstruation, and can be fatal if not treated effectively. And so Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month has been observed since 2016 as in March, and is after being designated by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. On March 1st, 2023, Representative Joe McKenna and the state legislature declared March to be Bleeding Disorder Awareness Month in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, with the goal to increase community awareness of blood and bleeding disorders and to recognize scientific achievements in the treatment of bleeding disorders for which there is no cure and the pursuit of advanced therapies. The aim is to increase awareness of the inheritable blood and bleeding disorders amongst the public, therefore enabling the prevention of unnecessary procedures, prevention of illness and disability. Carolyn, we'd like to thank you for sharing this information with us. And I know that you have direct experience with this. So if you'd like to just share a little bit more about your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I do have 2 children with hemophilia, and it has been a journey, but part of the experience is really bringing awareness to this and helping people understand that while their life is impacted by it, our like you said, our goal is to bring awareness, and the focus of research is to bring treatments to market that help my children and others affected lead a normal life.
Well, thank you again very much for bringing this to our attention, and we hope that that helps with additional awareness throughout the community. So thank you
Thank you.
again. Okay, we will be going into executive session from here. And we will be going into executive session to discuss two issues. One, pursuant to General Ledger Chapter 30A, subsection 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to a potential litigation. And the second, pursuant to General Ledger Chapter 30A, subsection 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for union personnel, specifically Westwood Permanent Firefighters Association Local 1994, IAFF, the discussion of which would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governing body if it were to be held in open session. The board will be returning to open session. We estimate that will probably be about 6:30, right, Chris?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
All right.
So I
Go
move
ahead.
that we go into executive session for the two aforementioned reasons.
I second that.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. We will be back shortly, folks. All right, we are back. Do I have everybody? Tish?
Like it.
We don't have Pat yet.
Oh, that's true. That's Pat. Don't see. Oh, here he is.
We good to go?
Think that's it.
Excellent. All right. Welcome back, everybody. We are going to move into scheduled action. We have Amanda Phillips joining us from the school committee with a request to submit a statement of interest to the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, for the Sheehan Elementary School. Amanda, welcome, and why don't you take it away?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. Yes, so Rob already kind of teed it up, but we are looking to submit our third statement of interest for the Sheehan School to the MSBA. We submitted one in 2021 and 2022, and now the deadline for this year is the end of April. And we would find out, I think, by like the end of December, whether we're accepted. And as Emily's probably explained to you in previous years, it's kind of unlikely that we'll be accepted, given that the Handler Deerfield project is still ongoing. But the committee feels that, you know, we have a responsibility to the community to at least try. So that's why I'm here asking for authorization for that.
Okay, and any questions from either of my colleagues?
No questions.
No, I'm good, Rob.
Very good.
So, all right, I move that the select board make a motion which includes the following resolutions. First, resolved, having convened in an open meeting on March 13th, 2023, prior to the statement of interest, the SOI, submission closing date, the Select Board of Westwood of Massachusetts, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated April 30th, 2023, for the Sheehan Elementary School located at 549 Pond Street, Westwood, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. Priority number 5, the replacement, renovation, and modernization of the school facility systems, such as roof, windows, boilers, heating and ventilation systems, to increase the energy conservation and decrease the energy-related costs in a school facility. And priority 7, the replacement and/or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. And hereby further authorize and further specifically acknowledge that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And I move that we select board authorize the school committee to submit the application in a timely fashion.
I second that.
All right, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Amanda, thank you very much for joining us here this evening.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank
too.
you.
Take
You
care,
as well.
Amanda.
See ya.
All right, next up, we have a request to change some hours for a couple of Dunkin' Donuts. I believe Nora Loughnane and Krista Costa are here as well. Nora, do you want to take us through this issue?
Sure. This request is for the 2 Dunkin' Donuts on Providence Highway. There's one in the northbound side of the road in Lambert's Plaza, and there's one on the southbound side of the road just past the Shell station. Both of those restaurants currently open at 6 a.m. The one at Lambert's, I believe, closes at 9 p.m. and the one on the Shell side of the street closes at 10 p.m. The request is to open at 5 a.m. We have some other businesses in town that do similar type of business that open at 5 a.m. and Dunkin' Donuts at these two locations would like to do the same. So the request is to change the hours for 115 Providence Street, which is the southbound Route 1, from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. and to change the northbound one in Lambert's Plaza at 236 Providence Highway. Change those hours to 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. This would be for service of food and beverages. They would not be permitted to have dumpsters emptied or have deliveries during that period of time. Those activities cannot begin till 6 a.m.
Okay, so no issue with the upcoming planning board warrant article.
There's not, no, it's consistent.
Okay. Any questions from either of my colleagues?
No questions.
So I move that select board approve the change of hours request for the Medway Donuts, Inc., doing business as Dunkin' Donuts at 115 Providence Highway, and Westwood Donuts, Inc., doing business as Dunkin' Donuts at 236 Providence Highway, both to open at 5 a.m. on their 2023 common victualler license, and for the select board clerk electronic signature to be affixed to the licenses. Both common victualler licenses will be amended to reflect the hours change and to include that deliveries and dumpster services are prohibited until 6 a.m.
I second that.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you, Nora. I think you're up again with the next one, right?
Yes. So
Okay.
the next application is for Neroli Mercato. This is a request for indoor seating. You might remember when they originally applied for their alcohol license, alcohol and CV license, they had some intention of outdoor seats on the patio before the Ristorante opened. The Ristorante is now open and they need the area on the patio when weather permits to set up for seating there. And that the board approved that seating, the outdoor seating, under the Ristorante's alcohol license. So the request here now is to add some indoor seats in the Mercato so that people who come and maybe want to have lunch there will be able to sit down and have service or purchase their food and sit down and eat it inside. So they're looking for 4 tables with 20 seats.
Questions from either of my colleagues with respect to this one?
No questions.
I guess my only question is there enough room, Nora? I was measuring it, but looking at the diagram. And I just didn't know it's 4 feet on one side and 3 on the other. So I guess that's from the edge. And I couldn't tell, honestly, I couldn't tell if the chairs were pushed in or not.
I think that is with the chairs pushed, with people sitting in the chairs. I think there's a clearance of 3 feet on one side, 4 feet on the other. So 3 feet is the minimum accessible clearance that you can allow.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So I move that the select board approve the request for the addition of 4 interior tables with 20 seats on the 2023 common victualler license for Islington Market Group LLC, doing business as Neroli Mercato at 274 Washington Street.
I second that.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. All right. Next up, we have Neroli Mercato. And again, Nora, and I believe is Mike with us?
Yes.
Yes, I'm
so
ready.
Mike DeSaro's here. So this is Neroli Ristorante now, this request.
Yep.
And this is for use of 2 on-street parking spaces as valet parking spaces. The request is for Fridays and Saturdays, as well as dates that are not specified yet when they have large special events that will be in need of valet parking. So Mike can explain a little bit more about exactly what you're planning to do and what the request is.
Yeah, I think you explained it pretty clearly. I think for us, it's just the 2 front spaces in front of the restaurant. The Mercato is right next door as well, but we're just looking to get cars safely into those 2 spots. I'm well aware that the businesses are open in some of those early hours around 4. But towards the later hours around 6, the only place really open is my Mercato next door. We're not looking to impede on any of the other businesses in the area. I just think on Friday and Saturday nights, it's important to take that extra precaution for us to take in the cars and park them in private lots behind the business. We know that guests can park across the street in municipal parking, which they have the option to do. We're offering that a free valet service to kind of expedite some of the people from crossing the streets as much as possible. We all know that Washington Street can be a little busy sometimes. But I really think that in order to be successful here, offering that valet at least on Friday and Saturdays, and potentially on special events that arise as they come, would be a really good addition to our business down here and for a safe way for people to enter the business and leave.
Nora, how would that work in terms of special events? Would Mike need to come back and?
So I don't think I think what he's asking is not to have to come back to the board each time he has a special event, but to notify the town and notify the police what dates those special
Yes.
events will be, so that they can know that those 2 valet parking spaces would be in use during those special events. So just to give you some information on the property, there's 52 open parking spaces behind the building. And the intention is that customers of the both the Mercato and the Ristorante would park in those spaces. But if they choose to, customers are free to park in the municipal lot across the way. It's actually really easy to park behind the building and walk up. You can come right up the stairs and go on to the patio where they'll be seating when the weather's appropriate for that. Walk out to the street and come in the front door. There's also a handicapped accessible entrance from the rear where you can take an elevator. So it's all very easy to park on the site, but customers don't always know that. And especially people who are new to the business may drive by, see the parking across the street, park there. That's perfectly fine too, as long as they're walking down to the traffic light to make that crossing, to make a safe crossing. But we all know that's not what people always do. They tend to cross mid-block. So the idea of offering valet parking on the same side of the street as the restaurant is just for the safety of customers.
Questions from either of my colleagues?
No, I have a couple, but Marion, I don't know if you were.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. So Mike, how close are you reaching an agreement with any of the businesses in the area for the valet service?
Close, but not complete.
Okay. And second of all, Nora, have we had any complaints from the neighbors at all as far as parking or anything that's going on since it's open?
No complaints from any neighbors that live anywhere around there. I have received a complaint from someone who lives further away who was concerned about the parking there. And I've made it a point to drive through the area multiple times, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, every evening while the restaurant's open. And I can tell you, I have not seen a single instance of a parking problem. The municipal lot in each case has been more than half empty. And most people are parking behind the building. The valet is parking cars behind the building as well. And so to date, I haven't seen a problem. The number of seats in the restaurant and the number of spaces that are available seems to work out very well if you were only using the property that the restaurant is on for parking. There are 52 spaces there. 52 spaces is enough to accommodate, I think, 208 tables, 208 chairs. Right now, I think the indoor, I think we had it calculated 206 seats, including all the seats at the bar. When the outdoor seats open up, it'll be slightly more than that. But the 52 seats on site are more than enough to accommodate the parking if that restaurant is full. And as Mike mentioned, other businesses aren't open during the peak of the restaurant from 6 p.m. on. Only the Mercato next door is open. All of the other businesses on that side of Washington Street are closed. Roach Brothers is open, has their own parking, and it's the other side of East Street. So there's no conflict there.
Okay. Thank you, Nora.
Yeah, I like the idea that valet would allow for more access for folks who may have difficulty walking or ambulating, perhaps for seniors. So I think it's a nice idea for better access for people.
I'll also point out there are 12 on-street parking spaces on that side of the street, and this only uses 2 of them. So there's plenty of on-street parking left.
Okay. over to the
One more question. Free valet?
Free.
All right, thank you. All right, good, ready for a motion, Rob?
I am. Thank you.
I move the select board to approve the request from the Islington Restaurant Group LLC, doing business as Neroli, for the use of 2 designated parking spaces on Washington Street in front of the Neroli Ristorante for valet drop-off and pick-up parking spaces on Friday and Saturday evenings from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. on a trial basis. Any other uses of the valet spaces for special events outside of Friday, Saturday evenings will require advance notice to the select board and the Westwood Police Department.
Marianne, before you second that, quick question. Are you looking for a 4 p.m. start or a 6 p.m. start?
6.
I was thinking the restaurant does open at 4, so I was hoping that it was a 4 o'clock start for that.
I think the question, Rob, is that you have Sally and Rocco's and the dry cleaners still open up until 6. And I think that was the thinking, not to take away from them on a trial basis and see how that works.
Okay. Is that what you were looking for, Nora?
So I understand Mike's concern about 4 o'clock, but I also share your concern that there are businesses open. I think discussing this with Mike ahead of time, the concern is that some of the older folks in town are more likely to go between that 4 and 6 period, and they're probably the ones that most are in need of the valet parking. Could there be a compromise and use 1 space for valet between 4 and 6 and 2 from 6 to midnight?
I could accommodate that on a trial basis for the select board in the town.
Okay, then I will amend my motion to include 1 parking spot to be used on Friday and Saturday evenings between the hours of 4 and 6 p.m. And then I will increase to 2 at 6 p.m. on a trial basis.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well.
Thank you very
All right.
much.
How's business going, Mike?
Very good. We're through week 2, so operationally it's great. Food's coming out good, just like the Mercato. I'm hoping everyone's loving it. It's been a roller coaster, but it's been really fun, and I'm glad to bring it to the town.
Excellent. Well, continued good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up on the agenda, we have Stephanie here with a budget update on the fiscal year 24 budget. Take it away, Stephanie.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Let me know if you can see the slideshow that's up. All set? Okay, great. Shannon, have a short presentation. I'm going to be going through the budget supplement articles we need for the current fiscal year, FY23, also known as Articles 1 and 2 for town meeting, and then also update some budget items for FY24 that will just need approval by the board before we move along to FinCom. So I will start out with the FY24 budget updates, and I'll begin with the outside assessments. The budget contains outside assessments that are part of the operating budget, and these are estimates that are included up until final numbers are received, and then at which time we adjust the budget. And one of those items is the Blue Hills Regional School Assessment. So we got the final FY24 budget figure from them, which was about $169,000. This is an increase of about 37,000 or 28% compared to FY23. The main drivers of this, we were told from Blue Hills, is an increase in the required contribution based on the governor's budget, plus an increase in Westwood student enrollment, which went from 6 to 8 students. 8 will be in FY24. So that did mean about a $25,000 increase in the original FY24 estimated budget. The next assessment is from MWRA, and that is part of the sewer budget. And the FY24 assessment is about 3.3 million. It is $100,000 less than the estimate that we carried up in the budget until now. So that number will be adjusted on both the expense side as well as the sewer revenue budget side, and there will be no overall budget impact due to that. Then moving on from assessments, we also received the FY24 health insurance budget. This has been discussed as part of previous budget presentation as a number that would possibly require an adjustment. And we did recently receive in early March the final rates from the GIC. So the average rate increase is 5.7. And you'll just see the ranges there. The active employee range, because we have multiple plans that people are enrolled in, is between 3.8 and 9.7%, and the most subscribed plan is 4.9, and then the retiree plans are between 1 and 2.8%. So this is some good news. It was 182,000 less than the original FY24 estimated budget. We were originally carrying an 8% increase to FY24 over 23, and when we plugged in the actual rates and calculated those along with the current enrollments, that number was able to be adjusted down. So it's 182,000 less than the estimated budget. And the fixed cost budget, which this is part of, will be updated to reflect this change. Some other good news, the preliminary state aid numbers came out since the last board meeting, and that number is higher than we originally projected in the FY24 budget. So chapter 70 in particular, that budget is currently just over $7 million preliminary still, but that is a $1 million increase over FY23. And for Westwood, that means about a 17% increase. And then we also have the other categories of municipal unrestricted, and then all other. So the total revenue is about $1,045,000. And then state charges, we were pretty on track with, so that's good news as well. Okay, so those are all the adjustments needed in the FY24 budget since the last time we presented on it, and all those updates will be incorporated. And just a quick highlight of some of the changes that have been made due to those updates. The operating budget side, school municipal, the current FY24 school budget as requested by the school committee is 54.7 million about, which is an increase of 5.8% over FY23. And then on the municipal side, the FY24 budget is about 23.6 million, which is an increase of about 4.6 over the FY23 budget. Changes since last time I presented on this include $40,000 for the fire department staffing, as well as $25,000 for the Council on Aging. This is due to increased activity and a lot of demand for van driver services. And so we're basing that off of the current 23 level of service. And then on the fixed and shared cost side, the current total FY24 budget will be 21.2 million, which is an increase of about 4.6 over the FY23 budget. We were originally estimating, I believe it was about 5.1%. So that's good. With this, within the fixed costs and shared cost budget, we have the select board reserve fund that has been 355 for the past couple of years. We are increasing that. We're increasing it to 355 over FY23 to account for some open contracts and public safety staffing. And then on the revenue side, we were able to reevaluate the tax levy that we had been projecting up until now. And the unused tax levy has been updated since receiving the information that I just presented on state aid and health insurance. And we were able to reduce the FY24 levy assessed number, which frees it up. We had that as zero, the excess levy, but we're now able to build back in $200,000 to that, which is good news for taxpayers. I'm now going to move on to the articles. Unless anyone has any questions on those, I can definitely loop back around at the end. But if there's anything people want to ask specifically on that right now. Otherwise, I'll move on to the two budget articles I'll be presenting on tonight. That's 1 and 2.
Mary Ann, Michael, either of you have any questions on anything from Stephanie so far? Continue on, Steph.
Great. So this might look odd, but for right now, the Article 1, we have no transfers needed for FY23. Snow and ice activity, I hate to say it with what's coming, but this year is not indicated a need to supplement through Article 1. So that is still being included, but is just showing a 0 request.
I think you just jinxed the perfect game.
I know, I didn't even want to say it. I hope not. So Article 2 contains adjustments that occur in the adjustments to the current year appropriation. So it's supplements for the FY23 budget. So there are a number of items in here that I will go through. The first 5 items are being supplemented through free cash. So this includes for the current fiscal year. I just mentioned that Council on Aging will be receiving an increase to FY24 budget, but right now, based on current levels in 23, we'll need a $25,000 to supplement that budget due to increased activity and, like I said, demand for van driver services. The second item is a supplement to the fire department salary budget. This has been seen before. It's due to current staffing demands and the continued impact of the Norwood Hospital closure and what that did to staffing and procedures of the department. Particularly the ambulance needing to travel to different hospitals at further distances. So then there's also a supplement to the police department budget for potential turnover related expenses. And then the last 2 items are school related. So they're both for $100,000. And the first one is special education reserve, which has been supplemented at the past. So this is to replenish the currently depleted fund, the reserve that they have related specifically to special education unfunded costs. So then there is $100,000 for McKinney-Vento, and I hope I get this right. It's an act. It's a required program related to transportation for homeless students. And I believe the school said even just recently they had another student who fell into this category. So it's just a supplement to their fund that they need that is also currently depleted. So all of these items add up to $393,000 and are to be supplemented through free cash. So then there are 2 items on here that I believe have probably been seen before. They're pretty standard. The first is for ambulance service and equipment. Each fiscal year, there's an ambulance amount that's built into the base budget for expenses. And then at the end of the year, we supplement for ambulance for the actual activity that is incurred. So this will be with ambulance receipts in the amount of $120,000, with 103 of that going to the fire department and then 17,000 for the collectors department, which is where the cost of the service hits for ambulance billing and collections of receipts. So that's just the breakdown there. And then lastly, there's also 85,000 needed for assessing reevaluation services. This is a full assessment that's done through our assessing department every 5 years. It's where the big hit comes in. And this has traditionally been funded through the overlay surplus, and we're asking for that again this year. So in total, we will fund $598,000 for Article 2. And like I said, $393,000 of that will be free cash, $120,000 of ambulance receipts, and then $85,000 from the overlay surplus. This slide is just sort of an overview of the balances in the available funds for 2 of the items I mentioned, which is the ambulance special reserve account and free cash. So the balances for year end, and then how much is applied in the current budget. So that's currently right now, it's built into the current fiscal year budget. And then a breakdown of, and that comes to what's available for Article 2, and then a breakdown of what we're requesting for Article 2 to be funded with. And then the projected balance, which as you can see for both the ambulance and the free cash side, it's especially free cash, it's keeping within the town's financial policies. So on both of those accounts, there's more than enough to absorb what we're requesting to fund with. So just next steps in the budget process for tonight, particularly, we're just looking for approval for Article 1 and 2, as I just presented. The FY24 budget, just an approval on the updates that are going through there. And then these final budget articles will then be submitted to the Finance and Warrant Commission. I know they're meeting tomorrow night and they will be giving their subcommittee reports. And after this meeting, I'll be sending along a memo to them with all the updates I have described here. And then the next big date, which I will be going in front of the Finance Warrant Commission, will be March 28th, which is their final public hearing. And I'll be presenting, and I've included, I'm not going to go through it tonight unless specifically requested to, but I've included in your package just an FYI of the anticipated presentation I'll be giving on the 28th, which includes all of these updates and just an overall rundown of all of the budget articles. And then after that, when they're reviewed and voted, the next step would just be the town meeting book. We'll assist with preparing that, which is mailed out to all residents in the town. So I'm happy to take any questions on any of those. Or on any of the financial articles in general, and I can go through any of those or answer any questions if needed.
Either of my colleagues have any questions?
Marianne?
Yeah, Stephanie, can you just explain for folks what is meant by the overlay surplus?
Sure. I hope I get this right. So we have an overlay fund that is for abatements, and this is done through our collectors and assessors office. And we submit as part of the operating budget. We fund that each year, and it's sort of there to for like I said, abatements on property taxes. So as part of this 5-year assessment that would occur, it's related to that. So we're using funds within that. And I believe, I want to say the last report I saw was in December of 2022, and the current fund has about $1 million, I believe, in it. We get certified each year by the DOR. I think it was about a little over 500,000 was certified for FY23 in the DOR. So does that help explain? And I can definitely get more information if needed.
Thank you.
Okay.
Marianne, you stole my question because I've been doing this a long time. I think this is the first time it's ever come up as an overlay surplus.
Oh,
So-
sorry. Should I rephrase it as something else?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at other presentations in the past, but it's the first time it came up as an overlay surplus. So, but that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'll stop sharing.
All right. You need us tonight, Chris, to approve Articles 1 and 2, or are we holding off on that?
I would request.
I'm sorry, yes. I apologize, I was on mute.
Sorry. Okay, before we do that, I see there is a question from a William Fitzpatrick. Mr. Fitzpatrick, if you would like to, you can put your question into the Q&A and with your name and address, and we'll happily get to that. I will give him a minute to do that. I don't see whether or not he's typing. Oh, there we go. All right, Mr. Fitzpatrick's question, if you would, sir, could you just throw in your address, please? So I can properly note that. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, Mr. William Fitzpatrick of 211 Forbes Road. He says, I have a question about the Westwood Fire Department's salary increases. How are we doing with recruiting and retention? I've read that this is a challenge across the state and curious how Westwood Fire is doing. I believe, Chief, you are here. Is that something you would like to speak to?
Sure. Our recruitment and retention is going really well. It is difficult finding certified paramedics, but we've done a great job recruiting, where people have heard me say all the time, I have the pleasure of working with rock stars. So we look to hire rock stars. And in the process of doing that, we now can actually send them to our own training academies for paramedicine. So that's not an issue that we're having in the sense of recruitment retention for us. We're almost completely fully staffed. We're bringing in 2 brand new members on April 9th. So we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Fitzpatrick, I think that answers your question, right? All right. let's now, if you'd like to make a motion with respect to Articles 1 and 2, Michael.
I will make a motion that we accept the amended financial articles, both numbers 1 and 2, for presentation to the Finance and Warrant Commission, as well as the public publication.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you, Stephanie. Great
Thank
work.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris, I believe this is your part here with respect to any amendment, acceptance, or removing of articles. Chris, you may be on mute.
Thank you very much. I recommend to the board to remove miscellaneous articles 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I'm asking for the board to keep one remaining miscellaneous article that I would discuss with the board at your next meeting.
So does it matter that we save 7 or 3?
You can keep 3. You can rename it 1, but I'm asking the board for one remaining miscellaneous article at this time.
Okay. So I move that the select board vote, well, we have several here, so we'll vote to remove 3 of the miscellaneous articles that we have held and remove them from the town warrant.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote on this one. Ms.
Excuse me,
LeBlanc.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Is it 3 or 4? We currently have 5 remaining miscellaneous articles. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on that.
Okay.
I'm asking if the board would remove 4 of those.
Okay. Then I will amend my motion to remove 4 articles.
Thank you.
And I accept that friendly amendment.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Chris, is there any additional requests with respect to budget articles? And you may be on mute again.
I'm sorry, I'm on mute again. I do apologize. No. Stephanie, is there anything you want to make a change to 1 through 13?
No, no changes. But have we, should we vote them tonight?
Just to know if there's any other changes. So, Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we have no changes to discuss at this meeting. We would like to bring this back to you at your next meeting scheduled for March 27th to have the board discuss and vote at that time.
Okay, and with respect to select board articles 1 and 2?
Yes,
Did we-
as far as select board articles 1 and 2.
Oh, we voted that at our last meeting, did we not?
I don't think you vote. I think we discussed, unless I'm mistaken. Tish, were those
You did
voted?
not. You did not vote at the last meeting.
So I would ask town council if there's any changes to the proposed language for select board 1.
Pat, you may be.
Not
on-
at this time, Mr.
Would you like the
Coleman.
board to vote at this time or?
That's
wait?
fine.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, yes, for select board 1, we're prepared to make a recommendation as written.
And how about for select board 2?
We are also prepared to make a recommendation as written.
Okay, I would entertain a motion on those. Is
So
there any
I move this
discussion?
select board vote to approve select board article number 1, the disposition of town-owned property at 47 Willard Circle, and select board article number 2, the home rule petition, and act creating an appointed positions of town treasurer and tax collector.
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Walsh,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Chris, any additional action needed by us tonight with respect to the warrant articles?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I believe both Dottie and is Jim O'Sullivan here as well? I haven't seen him in the
Yes, he is, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Okay. I believe there is a discussion regarding the start time of the annual town meeting. So Dottie or Jim, who's going to take lead on this?
So I I wanted to get the start time confirmed early on, and typically last year we started at 6:30, so check-in, we'd like to start at 5:30, and then introduction and recognitions at 6, and the business portion of the meeting will begin at 6:30.
So registration beginning at 5:30.
Yes,
Okay.
people can register, through, and people can still register if they come late. We'll always have somebody out in the lobby to check voters in.
And Jim, you're in agreement with that, right?
I am, Mr. Chair. I think it works well. It has worked well the last two meetings, the hour earlier starting time.
Very good. Questions from either of my colleagues with respect to the earlier start time?
What's the rationale, Dottie? What's the reason that you think that this change is better this time?
Well, Marion, we did it last meeting. We did it, and I think we started doing the earlier meetings when we were doing the outdoor meetings, and then we just felt like it, ran a lot smoother. We got people checked in early, and then we could adjourn our meeting at a reasonable time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it worked out for our voters and town meeting members.
Have you received, I'm just curious, have you received feedback from folks about the start time?
Nope. And I think basically, so we usually started at 7, and it's really starting a half hour earlier and just getting the recognitions and then the swearing in done before the actual start of the meeting.
Right.
And I heard a statistic today that said there's only half as many people working in Boston daily as there were prior to COVID. So most people are working from home.
Right.
Hasn't helped the traffic, but.
Michael, any questions?
No.
All right, we'll entertain a motion.
So I move that the select board approve a 5:30 start for the annual town meeting with registration, awards, recognition, and swearing in at 6, and the start of business to begin at 6:30 p.m. for the annual 2023 annual town meeting.
I second that.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Walsh.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you, Dottie. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next up, we have Dana-Farber Cancer Institute Proton Therapy Facility, a community services agreement. And this is Chris and Nora to present for the board's consideration a vote for a community service agreement with Dana-Farber for the aforementioned Proton Therapy Facility at University Station. I believe you have Special Counsel Dan Bailey here.
Yes, we do, Mr. Chair.
All right. Dan, are you taking lead on the presentation?
Yes, I will, Mr. Chair.
Take it away.
Thank you. And just introduction, I'm Dan Bailey, Special Town Council for University Station. Also on is Dr. Cynthia Keppel, who is our expert on the proton therapy facility and in particular on shielding and safety issues. We also have Wendy Gelman and Hugh Flaherty from Dana-Farber, who are here to answer questions if you need them, as well as Dana-Farber's outside counsel, Darren Baird. So what you have before you tonight is a community services agreement. This, we've talked about this several times, so I won't belabor it, but I'll remind the board and anybody that's watching that the original development agreement at University Station provides that before a tax-exempt entity can purchase any property at University Station, it has to enter into a payment in lieu of taxes agreement with the town. We did that to protect the town from having the project taken over entirely or in large part by tax exempt entities, which, while an important part of our economy here, really aren't what the town was dedicating its resources to in encouraging redevelopment of University Station. On February 13th, just last month, the board approved a memorandum of understanding with Dana-Farber. Staff and special town council have been working to finalize a fully binding community services agreement with Dana-Farber that incorporates the terms of the MOU. By means of update, Dana-Farber provided a first draft of the agreement in mid-February. We've worked with Dana, with Dr. Keppel, and with town staff, Nora, Chris, Pat, to make revisions to the community services agreement so it's consistent in all respects with the MOU. We also added additional details and calculations to clarify the amount of the CSA payment each year between Dana-Farber's acquisition of the property and its opening for patient treatment. Most recently, we made changes to the CSA to reflect Dr. Keppel's recommendations for additional analyses in the shielding study. You know, I'll mention to the board that the shielding study is what will be done by Dana-Farber and its experts. And if you have questions, Dr. Keppel can answer this a lot better than I can. But to put basically shielding concrete in places where there's the potential for absorption of protons and other radionuclides. So I'll also remind you that the primary terms of the community services agreement are that it requires an annual payment. The minimum payment is $380,000 for the first full year of operation. The CSA increases annually by 2.5%, or in the event of a Proposition 2.5 override, like we're going to see hit the tax base next year by the percentage amount of that override. There are both a cap and a floor on the CSA. The cap is just under 900,000, and the floor is 380,000, and it can also never go down. So as it goes up, say it goes up 2.5%, 2.5%, 2.5%, it can't go down below that accelerator. The term is 20 years, but the existing community services agreement remains in effect until it is replaced by a new CSA. If the parties cannot agree to a new CSA, an arbitrator would decide those terms. Unlike the Brigham and Women's Community Services Agreement, which I think Mr. Walsh was maybe the only select board member on the board at that time, but here payments are going to be made to the town during construction. The Brigham project did not make payments during construction. Probably the thing that we spent the most time on between the memorandum of understanding and this agreement are the terms of decommissioning of the concrete vault. As the board members know, there will be up to 9 foot thick concrete walls, as known as a vault, as part of this facility. That surrounds the Proton equipment. We had always been concerned that the cost to remove the vault when the facility is no longer used for proton therapy may exceed the value of the property. So we now have a section in the community services agreement that requires the vault be removed if the facility is no longer used by Dana-Farber for medical purposes. That avoids the risk of ending up with a very large piece of concrete that might make the property unusable by anything else. And finally, the agreement requires at Section 11 a shielding study. Terminology changed recently to an activation study, but as required by the MOU, Dana-Farber provided the town with a precedent shielding study. I included a copy of that study as well as comments provided by Dr. Keppel. We've been back and forth with Dana-Farber over the course of the last several days, including over the course of the weekend. Just today, I got comments from Dr. Keppel in response to some comments from Dana-Farber. And there are remain a couple of minor changes that are warranted to the language in section 11 on shielding and decommissioning. And Dr. Keppel can certainly speak to those, but they are minor, and I think we can work them out pretty expeditiously. I think if the board were to be inclined to approve the community services agreement tonight, you could do so with a condition that the final language in section 11 be reviewed and approved by Dr. Keppel and town council. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. I know we've had Dr. Keppel here on a number of occasions talking about the various shielding that gets done and how things are handled. So I have no questions with respect to safety. I do not know if either of my colleagues have any questions for Dr. Keppel this evening.
I'd like to hear more about section 11 from Dr. Keppel's perspective.
Sure. The changes I wanted, one of them is somewhat semantic, going back and forth about what is a shielding report and an activation report. We requested specifically the activation report because that has to do with decommissioning the building. And the idea that we've supported that Dana Farber has about putting this these removable blocks in place so that they can be pulled out. However, there's another kind of report which is done for every Proton center, which is called the shielding report. And this is where the placement of those blocks would be indicated and the assumptions that go into the radiation. So the clinical model and those things, but also the shielding report drives the design of the vaults for the building, how thick those walls will be based on the annual dose and instantaneous dose. So basically the safety today, well, not today, but the safety when the building's operating. So what I was saying is that we would want the shielding report anyway. The town would want the shielding report regardless. And then the activation report can be different language, but just to be clear that both of them would be needed. So anyway, there's just a little semantics with what to call what. And then
before you leave that, as you
sure.
say that would be required for the design phase anyway?
Yeah, they have the shielding report, not the activation. Activation, we're requesting specifically for this question about decommissioning. The shielding report, they have to do anyway, because they need to look at how much radiation do they need to be protecting the public from in order to get their approval to turn on the machine anyway. So they need it for construction. Regardless, every Proton center does a shielding design report because you have to design the shielding of the vaults. In our case, though, it will have those additional blocks and things for the long-term activation question in it. So there are two different reports, and there was a little bit of semantics back and forth about which is which and so on. So we can just clarify that. So that was one of the things. Let's see. They had, Dana Farber wanted to change a little bit of language about activation levels, which I thought was fine. They had accepted my suggestion that allowable transport levels. So what I mean by this is if you're carting this concrete away, there's guidelines, federally set guidelines for what is allowable levels of radiation to be put on a truck on the highway in public, and to put those in the report and then, compare what they're seeing for their blocks to those, right? So that somebody who is decommissioning doesn't have to pay extra because you can't just transport it away. And they said that they would put the numbers in. So that's good. I think though, if what's projected is larger than what's allowable, it's not just putting numbers in, right? But anyway, that's that question. And then there was something about benchmarking the Monte Carlo, which I'm not particularly worried about. I think I can clarify what's needed. I think they thought I was asking for a lot more work than I am. And that's it.
Okay. Questions from either Marianne or Michael for Dr. Keppel beyond what has been stated? So Dan. Yep, go ahead, Michael.
So, Dr. Keppel, is the shielding study report, is that regulated, federally regulated with standards other than, or is it kind of out
Absolutely.
there?
Yeah, so to get permission to turn on the machine, they needs to actually the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, has approved many states, yours being one of them, to actually regulate themselves. So they will have to get permission from the state regulatory agency to turn on. And this design report is one of the things that they will submit to the state, but they need it even before that, substantially before, because it also just determines how thick the walls are. So they're architects and construction contractors and everyone need to know. Also, it has not just how thick the walls, but the composition of the walls, so that you give that to your concrete contractor. All of those things are the design of the building, the vaults of the building. And so the shielding report is done fairly early in the process of building a Proton Center because it drives the design.
You know, has the shielding requirements changed over the years?
Oh, yeah, but not much. Yeah, there's two really main numbers. There's an annual dose limit in public areas, and there's an instantaneous dose limit in public areas. And those are the two most stringent numbers. And so those drive the design. There's a bunch of other numbers, controlled areas and things like that, but those two are the most stringent and tend to drive designs. And they've been the same for a decade or so.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask Nora, have all of your concerns been met relative to the CSA, Nora?
They have. So I was concerned about receipt of the activation and shielding study early enough that it can factor into the planning board review process. And I was also concerned with the potential for decommissioning, and I think it's well addressed in the CSA.
Thank you.
So Dan, you would like us to make the motion with a sort of a note to have this additional language just be reviewed and vetted, correct?
Correct.
And if I may, to just clarify that, it would be a motion to accept the CSA conditional upon language in section 11 being further revised and approved by Dr. Keppel and Town Council. Is
Yes.
that fair?
May I interject for a moment, Mr. Chairman?
You may.
Listen, I think we've worked well as a team. I want to be able to lean on Nora and Dan to make sure we get paragraph 11 correct as we move forward. That would be the only thing I would ask.
So in addition to Dr. Keppel, town staff.
Yeah, town staff.
Very
But
good.
we've gone at this as a team. Let's not change the batting order now.
Sure.
Totally.
Town staff and Dr. Keppel. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay.
Excellent. All right. I would entertain a motion if there are no further questions.
So Rob, usually, you know, I make the motion, but as you've all known all along, I cannot make the motion, and just for several reasons. I'd just like to state why. I'm not happy with the 2.5% cap that will be there. I'm not happy that it's going to start at 380 and it's not guaranteed. But the cap comes in at 900,000, and according to this plan, they will never pay more than 900,000 in taxes. And I think it's a bad deal for the town. I understand the money seems good right now, but this is going to handicap the space at University Station forever. And so for that reason, I don't think it's in the best interest of the town. And I respect your and Mary Ann's opinion. This just happens to be my opinion. And for that reason, I will not make the motion.
Understood. Thank you very much, sir.
And if I may, Rob, I don't want to say, I love Dana Farber. My dad went there several times, and I hope I never need their assistance, but I cannot vote in this for the town of Westwood because I don't think it's in our best interest.
And we can respectfully disagree, as I believe we have done an excellent job of getting to, the 100% mark of what the alternative uses might be. And there is significant benefit to the economic ecosystem down there. So respectfully, thank you for your comment. And I would entertain a motion from Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
I move to approve the community services agreement between the town and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and to authorize Select Board Chair Robert Gotti to execute the agreement on the board's behalf, conditional on the language of Section 11 of the agreement being approved by town staff and Dr. Keppel.
I will second that out of necessity. Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Walsh.
No.
And I vote aye as well. Wendy, Hugh, thank you for all of the time and effort that has gone into this. I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to say before we move on to our next agenda item.
I'm just going to say thank you all for all of your work and your consideration. And Dr. Keppel, I'm very confident that we'll be able to sort that out. And especially if we could get you and Mark, our shielding expert, on the phone, perhaps. I would guess it will take 5 minutes. But in any case, we'll take whatever time we need.
I concur. I don't think it's a big thing, and I'd be happy to hop on a call with Mark. That would be great.
Okay, great. We'll make that happen. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Welcome to Westwood. I see there's a question in the Q&A from Kathy Sullivan of 283 Farm Lane. Ms. Sullivan, if you'd like to put your question in the Q&A, I don't know if you're in the process of typing that. Happy to entertain it. I'll just wait for that. Sent an error. Okay, very good. So we can next move on to thank you again, Wendy, Hugh, Darren, for all the work to this point. And I would like to especially thank Town Council and Nora and Chris for all of the work that has gone into this thus far. Obviously, Dan as well. So let's get this last little bit of language firmed up and let's move on. Let's get these guys into town. All right, next up, we have new business, and this is an update regarding the feasibility study of Firehouse. So I would like to invite Chief Deckers and Chip Heidkamp from Doran Whittier, as well as Travis Miller from Criterion, to give us an update. Go ahead, Chief, take it away.
All right, great. I want to thank the board for allowing me to come before you this evening to report on the progress of our operational and facility study. Just to provide some background for those on the call this evening, the Select Board approved the funding for the feasibility study for Station 1 at their February 28th of 2022 meeting. After that meeting, I began working with the procurement agent on developing the request for proposals, the RFP. This process took a while because of the size and scope of this project. The final feasibility study was issued on August 15th of 2022 with a closing date of September 1st. We ended up extending that closing date to the 6th to allow some other contractors to submit proposals. In the end, we awarded the project to Doran Whittier and began the development of the official contract. During our initial discussion with Doran Whittier, we decided that we really needed to formally update our past 2007 and 2013 operational studies to ensure that if we're going to renovate or build new, that we were building a firehouse that would support not only our current needs, but the community's needs well into the future. At the October 24th meeting, the select board approved additional funds for our operational study. We had reached out originally to the firm that produced the two older studies to see if they could, update their last two studies, but they could not complete the operational study in the time frame that we needed. They were like 8 to 12 months out because of their workload, and we wanted this much quicker. This also enabled us to get a new set of eyes to look and validate the older reports and then compare those recommendations of the past reports to our current needs and trends in the industry. So we took a look at other firms to provide the study and decided on Criterion Associates. Both the operational and feasibility study contracts were finalized in December of 2022. There was a question that some folks thought this had already been done and we just hadn't released any of the information, but those contracts were finalized in December of 2022. We set the timelines for each project. The operational study would be done in late March, early April, and you're going to see shortly that we're pretty much on track with that. While the feasibility study took longer because, again, of the size and scope, and we predict that should be done early summer, but Dor Whittier may have some more information this evening on that.
Chief, real quick, just to sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Just where some of that confusion may have been around the timing, just to be clear, the RFP process opened in August and was due to close at the end of December, right? And so that's, yeah. Okay.
Yep. And that's what this takes time to build those contracts out and do everything. So in December 13th, we had our kickoff meeting with Dor Whittier and Criterion Associates, trying to figure out, what we would be doing, how the plan would go, all the different steps. After that meeting, Dor Whittier issued an online survey for all fire department members. It took about 4 weeks for us to get that back, and we met again on January 26th. So by January 26th this year, the process had really begun to rock and roll on that, and we looked at programming and design. And just by the way, we got over 50% responses from our members, which is actually pretty good when you're talking about online surveys and people giving information. So that was awesome that our membership provided this much feedback, and it was really good feedback. Criterion Associates, Travis Miller, who you'll hear from tonight, started off his portion of the project by meeting with myself and Assistant Chief Lund to get a picture of Westwood. Then we supplied Travis with incident data, and I took incident data from January 1st of 2017 through the end of 2022. So we gave him a pretty good data set to look at, and he's going to go into this a little bit more for you. And then one of his jobs was to find out, where's the best place to put, a new station if we're going to build one new. So he's going to talk about that. He also looked at our current staffing and leadership model, and he'll be making recommendations specifically around the number of officers we really need to do our job on a daily basis. I'll ask both Travis and Chip, or whoever else from Dor Whittier wants to speak, to provide a brief update on their portions of the project and what the next steps are. I think Travis is ready to go first.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Chief, for that. Appreciate it. So just a quick background on myself and then the process, and then I'll give some guidance. So I've been doing consulting work with local government for north of 25 years. Spent some time working as an economist and as an investment banker, working with local government prior to that. The sort of state of the art of fire station location has come a very long way from the time when I used to keep a collection of like the Folgers coffee can, like the big one, and work your way down through like the little tomato paste thing. I literally had a collection of cans that I would use to draw circles on maps. Now we're using geographic information systems, GIS, to figure out where to put facilities, really using the same product that explains why it is that everywhere you drive, you'll find a CVS on one corner, and kitty corner from that, you'll find a Walgreens, or why there's always a Target next to a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a Michael's or a Home Goods or Walmart or whatever. They're all looking for ways to service the needs of their customers, which is what they're sort of paying you for every time you get to save $1 on a pound of bacon because you've given them your telephone number. That data is valuable to them. On the other hand, from a public safety perspective, you're collecting tons of information, and occasionally somebody like Chief Deckers comes along or somebody like me comes along. We actually make use of those data points. In this instance, we were given a handful of locations to test, which came from available property you already own, somebody's great idea about where to put a fire station, et cetera. And then, as the chief hinted at, in addition to evaluating those locations and your current headquarters location, we assessed sort of the best place to put a fire station. Now, by best place to put a fire station, you actually have to tell the computer what you mean by that. And what we mean by that is, if I let you put a fire station, if I let you put headquarters in this example, any place you want to, where would you put it so that response time to all the calls for service that are in that 5-year data set that the chief provided us, what's going to give you the fastest response time across that universe of calls? Now, clearly, your worst intersection in town, the assisted living facilities, more recently in the past, say 5 or 6 years, the dock in the box or urgent care kinds of facilities, your high school, those kinds of places tend to be big drivers of call volume, way more so than a single family home. And so, the model looks at all of that and says, okay, if I have to go there 700 times over the past 5 years versus going there once in the past 5 years or never, where would you want to put a fire station, given that you're going to be limited in how many fire stations you're going to operate? You can't put one across the street from everybody. And so the interesting thing was that several of the opportunities or properties that we were given to evaluate, including headquarters, are all relatively close to headquarters on High Street, within, I don't know, half a mile or so of where headquarters is, in either direction on High Street. And when the model was given its choice, not knowing about any of those alternatives, it plopped one on High Street too. So essentially, we're now left with, from an architectural and engineering perspective, what's the best location that we can use among that subset of locations that's on High Street, whether it be slope or polka dotted turtles that have wings, or whatever it is that you're looking at in terms of constraints, and where can we put it? Because most of them, in fact, all of them on that little High Street corridor cluster, provide for the same level of response time. They provide for the same level of what we talk about as fractile time, meaning a place that you can get to 80% of your calls in 4 minutes or less of drive time is certainly better than a place that you can get to 40% of your calls in 4 minutes or less of drive time. The next piece for us was taking a look at the sort of staffing and operational perspectives, because the architects need that in order to think about not only today, but also the future of a facility that might be, given that it's Massachusetts, this could be a 50, 60, 70, 100-year facility that you're constructing. And when we take a look at similar communities handling similar levels of workload, with very similar service level targets in terms of delivering both fire rescue and EMS services at the advanced life support option, sort of playing with Norwood Hospital is closed. How long is that going to last? What does that potentially do to us in terms of service delivery? Should that reopen in the near future or not so near future? We've arrived in a model that suggests that, both stations should have a staffed engine company with an officer on that engine. You should have an overall shift commander so that when the chief is home and asleep, and at least for the first, few minutes between he and the assistant chief, somebody's in charge of the shift, somebody's in charge of the department. That you should have 3+2, meaning an officer, a lieutenant, 2 firefighters on the engine, 2 firefighters on the medic at both stations, as well as a shift commander, captain, or whatever title you want to use going forward. And that's kind of the now, the near term now sort of view of things. And the longer term, and this is the piece that needs to be fed into the architectural piece, is at some point you'll start hitting a trigger of workload where you're going to want to staff. And I really do try to think about this from a small suburban community's perspective, that you should staff a ladder with an officer and a couple of firefighters who can also jump staff to a heavy rescue, so that if you get a structure fire, you send a ladder. If you have a significant rollover event on one of the highways or major thoroughfares that passes through Westwood, you have the ability to deploy a heavy rescue with the specialty tools that they have. So when you see the report from us in a week or so, you'll see that we're talking about a sort of now state and a future state. That future state is, I really don't know yet if that's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. But at some point, it's something you're going to need to plan for, and certainly within the lifespan of a new headquarters fire station. And I forgot to mention, I've known Chris for a very long time, even when he didn't have to worry about unmuting when he was in meetings. A long time. We grew up together.
All right, so thank you, Travis. Chip, I don't know, is there more to add from your perspective? I look forward, Travis, to seeing your report and when it's ready.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do have a quick update. I don't know if Don, if you want to do a quick intro.
Yeah, if I could, thanks, Chip. Hey, Chief, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're just wanted to let you know how happy we are to be back in Westwood. We've been doing public safety work now since 2006 throughout Massachusetts and New England. And I say this with all seriousness, we are just so pleased to be working with Travis. We have a chance to work with him on a number of jobs, and he's just top notch at what he does. But in terms of Dorn Whittier, principal with the firm, Chip is our project manager. And you see Jason Harris here too, who's been working on the programming and the design for Westwood. But in terms of some relevant experience in the area, we did Fire Station 2 in Islington. We did the new police station. We did the Medfield Public Safety, Situate, Maynard, finishing up Dedham right now. And we just received bids on the Norfolk Fire Station. So we've done quite a bit of work in the area. And one thing that it is safe to say is that fire station operations and fire station design is constantly evolving. So what we designed in Islington and Fire Station 2 is different, going to be a little bit different here today. So just so you know, we're constantly updating these facilities as we go through. So I just wanted to give you that little bit of background on us and our experience, and I'm going to turn over to Chip now just to give a brief update as to where we are on the study.
Thanks, Tom. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so a lot of breadcrumbs have already been dropped. So I'll be pretty quick and to the point, which we mentioned talking about the programming aspect. We kind of take a dual track approach when we did the study. So we're running programming that the chief mentioned earlier with the questionnaire process, which kind of results in a space needs analysis. That then Jason's on the call today. He's now we take that information and we kind of bake that into the size of the building, recommended adjacencies, and then kind of how these buildings come together, put them on the sites, kind of proof of concept them through, see what works, what doesn't. We're actually starting review of that process tomorrow with the chief. We'll be having a call tomorrow and start going through that process. So there's a couple more iterations that will be done there. The second part of the track is the building assessment, existing conditions reports, which those have already ourselves and our consultants have already been to the site. We've seen it, so we have done that. We did do an update this is an update to the 2007 report that we did, which included both of the previous buildings that Don talked about, both police headquarters and FS2. So this will be the last building that was included in that report. So this will be a more robust, more thorough, more focused report. just on the needs of this building from all of the various disciplines. Like I said, our consultants have been out. Our site consultant has been out to review the site. So we have those draft copies back. So we're going through those, going through that kind of that process. And then we will be kind of folding that, taking and finalizing all those reports, and then folding in kind of the concepts that we're working through, and will result in a preferred option and a cost kind of a cost estimate that we can kind of share with the team. And our goal right now, we're kind of we're looking to the end of April to kind of pull this whole report together and turn that over and have that ready for review.
Okay, Chief. Just in terms of the comprehensive presentation from all the various parties, when are you anticipating being before us with everything?
I would assume late May. Late May right now, because we're going to want to review everything and tie everything back together. But I'm going to work with Chris on that and figure out when to do that. But for sure, we'll be looking at late May, early June on our next steps and looking to what we're going to do for the future.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for the update. Before we let you go, I'm going to ask my colleagues if either of them have any questions with respect to process, where we are now, and what's next. Michael, Marianne, any questions for the team?
I do. Yes. Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify that the operational study that's being done is feeding into the work that you folks at Durham Whittier are doing, because you need that programming information in order to think about what it is we need in terms of a building. Is that fair to say?
It is. We work together a lot. They are by far, I was going to say you're by far my favorite architectural firm, but it would have sounded like I was repaying a compliment, Don, so I'm not going to say it. But it's true. Yeah, we will be feeding that directly in. I spent a lot of time back and forth working with the programming lead at Durham Whittier. We talk several times a week about every project that we're working on together, just to make sure that not only are we talking about the direction that we're taking something, or that I'm trying to take something from a recommendation perspective, but also trying to be as creative as we can, looking at various ways to address those needs, right? So it's, okay, do we need to build those rooms today? Are there ways that we can reserve space for future staffing needs in terms of like sleeping quarters and bathrooms and living quarters and things like that? What do we need to build now versus what can we reserve for later? Are there opportunities to do things with flexible space? I mean, I think one of the most significant changes that's probably occurred in fire station design is the idea that dorm rooms and large scale locker rooms are essentially a thing of the past. You literally don't know what the mix of your employee group at a station is going to be Monday versus Tuesday versus Thursday versus Sunday. You literally don't know. I mean, I've worked with departments where Sacramento, California, they had a shift in one station that had literally 6 guys, which you would, that's kind of normal. They had another shift that was 6 women. Literally not a guy on. And so if they built these locker rooms, they'd have days when they were overcrowded in the men's locker room and men's dorm. And then 2 days later, overcrowded in the women's dorm and women's locker room. And the third shift was kind of a mix of both. And Jason and I, who's the lead on the programming piece, Jason and I spent a lot of time talking about our shared experiences, talking about people that we're talking to. I mean, I work all over the country. And so I'm constantly running into new ideas, or as we would call them in New England, really weird ways of doing business, or crazy, we might also call them, depending on your perspective. But yeah, we're constantly informing one another and really trying to drive the direction and challenging each other all the time in terms of where we're taking our work.
If I could just follow up on that, Travis, thank you for that.
Sure.
I also just wanted to clarify, I'm anxious to see your reports. And one of the things you'll be doing, Travis, is recommending what our level of service should be now by way of firefighters in both Station 1 and Station 2. So the level of service we should have now as well as into the foreseeable future.
Yeah, so level of service can mean a couple different things. So let me talk about both of them. So one is, what are we doing? Like, what are we actually delivering, and who is it that's delivering that service? So it's inescapable in modern in the modern Northeast that you're going to respond to fire and rescue events, and you're going to respond to emergency medical events. And the emergency medical events are, by and large, a much more significant, at least as dispatched, part of the workload than fires are. I mean, there's been a major change in fire rescue workload since the 70s, and some really like things that we all take for granted now, like smoke detectors, which have made a massive impact on the fire rescue workload balance. I think that I'm a big believer in fire-based EMS service delivery for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is it enables you to provide for enhanced level of staffing for when you have large scale events that require a lot of people, and that's being at least partially funded by the revenues from delivering emergency medical services. I sat through your Article 1, Article 2 discussion, and that ambulance fund is not a small amount of money, and you're able to use that to deliver a wide variety of services in fire rescue. Secondly, in terms of level of service, it's about staffing models and how are you balancing, in Massachusetts, how are you balancing Prop 2.5 versus the optimal way of delivering services? And from my perspective, in a suburban community, the kind of 3 people on an engine or ladder or heavy rescue and 2 people on a medic is a good balance between fiscal prudence and the maximally optimal way of delivering service. I live in Maryland, in Baltimore County. They run 4-person engine and truck companies, 4-person heavy rescue companies, 2 people on a medic. Part of the way they afford to do that is that half of the stations are run by volunteers. If they had to staff all of those pieces, my guess is the 4-person staffing would fall away very quickly. Right? If they're having to do it, and if they're having to pay for all of it. So yes, that's a very long answer to what I could have just said yes to. Sorry.
Thank you.
Marianne, any follow-ups?
No, thank you.
Michael?
So I guess without tipping our hand, do we know, are we waiting on Travis to pick a location before we pick a location, or do we have an idea where the location's going to be, and then it's just a matter of adjusting the size?
So the working group has seen the location analysis in kind of a draft form, just to make sure that I wasn't crazy, right? I mean, because I don't live in Westwood, although I have lived near Westwood most of my life. And what was really interesting was that the sites within kind of a span on either side of headquarters and headquarters itself, and headquarters is a challenging site. I mean, from an engineering and architectural perspective, it's a great sledding hill and a terrible place to build a building, right? You'll get to experience, well, I don't know if you're in the snow line or not. That map is very strange looking for you guys. Sorry, if you get slush and no sledding, sorry. But there are several sites within close proximity to headquarters. The VFW site is they each have their little challenges, right? One is on a 45-degree slope, not really, but close enough. The other one is maybe a little bit too small with challenging ingress and egress. It's really going to be a balancing act between what can we do in terms of site prep, what can we do to mitigate some of the challenges, but something in what I think of as sort of historically the downtown area of Westwood is a great place for headquarters. And it's just balancing those various site needs and trying not to take anybody's favorite restaurant or house or something like that. I mean, the optimal location that the model found, because the model doesn't care who lives there, who works there, who does whatever there is. I had one in another one of the West communities in Massachusetts. It wanted to take away literally the most profitable business in town and plop a fire station there. It's not going to happen. So then it's a matter of, okay, is the optimal location close enough to something that you already own or that you can swap for or that you could buy at some reasonable price? And the good news is the optimal location is right in the middle of all those other high street locations. I mean, really close to all of them.
So just to build on Michael and Mary Ann's questions there, then, because you are working on the operational side of things as well as the siting options, and then the Dorn Whittier team is taking the operational study and factoring that into sort of size and configuration. I imagine we'll not be hearing a recommendation on location till that end of May timeframe that Chief Decker's laid out.
Yeah, I would think that's true. I mean, once I hand over the sort of stack rank, this is the best place from a response time perspective. This is second best, and when I say first, second, third, several of these locations. In fact, I just had the same experience in a community up on the North Shore, in Essex County. They gave me 6 locations. I'm like, there's like 12 seconds of difference in response time between any of these places. I don't care. Put it wherever you want to. It's not going to make that much of a difference. That's exactly the situation from a response time perspective that you are in with a shorter list of addresses. And so it really is going to come down to site prep, and like, you may find that one's a great location, but it's going to cost you $5 billion in site. I mean, it's a stupid number, but like, it's going to cost you a ton of money in site prep. Whereas this one over here, that second place, is essentially free from a site prep perspective. Would you be willing to take 7 seconds of extra response time to save $5 million? Usually people would be. And we're really talking about that kind of tightness in terms of the response time performance.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, Chief? Anything further to say with respect to this?
No, I have nothing else to add right now. I mean, we did talk about the staffing and the need for additional, supervision.
Yep.
So that's a good thing that we mentioned. So, and I think we're scheduled to talk a little bit more about that later.
We are actually scheduled to talk about something like that right next.
Next.
So with that, Travis, Chip, Don, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank
Chief,
you all.
We look forward to seeing the output of your results.
Thank you so much
for your time.
Thanks so much,
you all.
everybody.
Thank you so.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, next up, Chief, I believe you have a promotional opportunity that you'd like to present to us.
Yeah, so in my FY24 budget submittal, I had basically listed the top 3 priorities for the department. And one of those was to create 4 additional officer positions, which are basically the first line supervisor, lieutenants, for the oversight of personnel at Station 1. And as you just heard from Travis in all his studies, he basically agrees with that, that we need to have those lieutenants. It's something we've been looking for, and that has been in my budget proposals for the last couple of years. There's several reasons that I'm making this request. And it keeps in line with the 2007 and 2013 studies recommending an officer assigned to be each apparatus. It also is confirmed by Criterion and Associates. But really, we've seen a large amount of retirements and staff changes since I took over the department in 2017, causing a loss in firefighting experience throughout the department. I've been blessed with the ability of hiring almost 50% of our department, but that makes them only have 5 years or less of experience, which makes it a real difficult situation when we're putting these people in emergency incidents that really require real life experience in our service. so that their leadership can be tested and be ready to ensure all the safety of our firefighters. And more importantly, have efficient mitigation tactics. Also, the addition of these lieutenants will allow us to concentrate on strengthening our existing staff members, enhance our deployment strategies, and increase our employee oversight to better support our current operational demands. Our 5-year study of incident data shows that we've seen a lot more increase significantly over the last couple of years. An example of this in the metrics that we look at is how many of these calls are overlapping. That means multiple calls occurring at the same time. In FY18, we had overlapping incidents 18% of the time. In FY22, that number was 33%. So when we have overlapping incidents, that means our less experienced personnel assigned to Engine 5s are being forced to handle incidents without any supervision of an officer or a delayed supervision while they wait for the incident commander. An example of this is last week when I was quickly looking at our daily staffing. The average years of experience on our Engine 5 that day was 2.15 years of service. Now on our Engine 2, I had almost 20 years of service. So one would say, hey, well, then let's just move some of those people over from Station 2 and even out the experience. The problem is, because we've hired 50% new people, when that experienced firefighter takes a day off, I could still be left with 2.1 years of combined experience on the truck. So the right decision, and I hope the board will agree with me, is that we work with the union and then begin negotiations of bringing on 4 more lieutenants at Station 1 as soon as possible. And I've been working with Chris Coleman, Molly, and Stephanie on trying to find, the potential solutions to be fiscally responsible. And I think we've found that that funding. And so I'm asking for your support on allowing us to implement this promotional opportunity and move the department forward in our master plan. Thank you.
Okay. Chris, Stephanie, you have anything that you want to say with respect to the funding solutions that have been identified?
Mr. Chair, sure. What Stephanie, her presentation earlier this evening, talking about the increase in state aid that the town has received from the governor's office is crucial into this recommendation. So, and I know the board has heard this before, and I'm sorry to bore you, but we have reoccurring expenses. We need reoccurring revenue. We now have some preliminary numbers that give us that indication that we will have that reoccurring revenue. The chief has made this recommendation in the past. We haven't been able to find that new reoccurring revenue. Now we have. This is certainly something that we behind, in conversations with the chief, we're in support again, but we just need to find that reoccurring revenue, and we believe we have now.
Very good. And based on the preliminary indications from Travis, certainly warranted. So questions from either Marianne or Michael?
No, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. So Chief, I just had, looking at it, are you looking to promote from within or outside or both?
Oh, no, absolutely for in. As you heard me say before, I have the pleasure of working with rock stars, and we have plenty of rock stars in our organization. We actually have an active lieutenants list. I think it has 9 people on it right now. So we have many opportunities to promote excellence, and I plan on moving in that direction. We would never hire this position from outside.
Okay, thank you. But I also want to say, Chief, there's a commercial now. You can't call them rock stars anymore, but we can talk about that another time.
They're great employees. How's that?
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, Chief, I know, speaking for myself, that we thank you and the department for everything that you do. And so we want to make sure that you've got the experienced staff in place and leadership in place. So with that, I would entertain a motion if there are no further questions.
Mr. Chairman, you have a comment in the Q&A.
Very good. Okay. This is from Ms. Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. Why has it taken this long to act on giving our first responders an increase in salary? I'm sure others are working for the town have received theirs. Everyone deserves an increase in pay. When will this be resolved? Chris, do you or Molly want to comment on where things stand with respect to this? Because this is actually a promotional opportunity for the chief, and this is not necessarily related to increase in pay for the broader department. This is more the promotional opportunity. Would you like to comment on that?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I'll ask Molly if she wants to comment first, and I'll certainly follow up if there's any additional information that's needed.
Sure. So, obviously that we're not looking to bargain in public. So the high level of this has been that the town and the fire union have been engaging in bargaining over a successor collective bargaining agreement for a number of months, I think back to the spring of 2022. Unfortunately, those talks haven't yet resulted in an agreement. The union has filed with the Joint Labor Management Committee back in December to have town and union sort of represented mediators come and help the parties together to see if we can come to an agreement. It's a state agency, so it takes some time. I'm delighted that they reached out to us end of last week or beginning of this week, setting a date for late April. So we'll be back to the table with them in April to hopefully come to an agreement over a 3-year deal. I will say that in terms of promotional aspect of this would not be tied to that collective bargaining agreement. Obviously, it would have to be negotiated with the union, and I'll be reaching out to them later this evening to talk about the impacts of what this would look like and negotiate over those. But that has the ability, because of its operations and nature, to move forward faster than the main table collective bargaining agreement. Chris, is there anything that I missed out on?
No, I think you covered it all. Thank you very much, Molly.
Okay. See a couple of other questions in the Q&A. A second one from Ms. Fusco. Why does coverage vary based on vacation time, injury, or sick leave? We should have the requisite number of staff on each shift. The chief has stated that there are 10 in each group, but coverage can go down to 8 by contract from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. That does not seem safe for the firefighters or the residents. Chief, you want to comment on that?
Sure. And the reason that staffing model was adopted early on had to do with finances and the fact that the majority of our firefighters actually lived in town at the time. And so even though we're a fully 100% career-based department and don't rely on call firefighters, we relied in the past on a recall system. And people have heard me say it here and in other places that our recall system doesn't work anymore for what it was intended to work. We are working with the town, as you heard from Criterion Associates, to get our staffing level to where it needs to be with 5 people at each station in a shift commander. That's 11. It's going to take us a little while to find that reoccurring money, as Chris Coleman had pointed out earlier. So while we do that, we still rely on the recall system, which, as I said, had been working. It does not work as well anymore, but we also created peak level staffing back in 2018. That made our staffing not drop below 9 during the day shifts, plus Monday through Friday, we have surge staffing. So it brings us up to 11 members, not including myself and the assistant chief. On weekends, everything was built on supply and demand. So, our call volume was based on that. When Norwood Hospital closed, we immediately put on 8 members at night, and we still rely on ambulance recalls to fill those gaps. So that's why we did what we did, but we're changing philosophies now, and it's going to take us a little while to get there to make sure that we have the funding. And I'm going to rely on Stephanie and her powers to find that for us. And the continued support of the community.
Thank you, Chief. Then the next question is from Kathy Sullivan of 283 Farm Lane. She says, will the fiscal year 24 budget presented for approval at town meeting include sufficient funding to act on the anticipated recommendations from the operational study? I'm hearing that we found some money, but we have still not settled the contract. Why is this taking so long to settle? Has the chief presented a staffing proposal that will minimize the use of the recall system and decrease our dependence on mutual aid for the 24 budget? And do our surrounding towns rely on mutual aid more than we rely on them? If so, more, yeah. And if so, how will this regional deficiency be addressed? So I think there's sort of three parts to this question. I think the first part is probably best answered by Molly with respect to the timing of the contract and the state that we're in with respect to collective bargaining.
Sure. One, these, they almost all collective bargainings take time. They don't all take this amount of time, but it's something that you have to work through methodically. Just speaking, strictly in facts here, the fire union in the town met a number of times in the spring of 2022. It was before my arrival, but it was my understanding that the negotiating teams for both the town and the union came to a tentative agreement that was brought to the full membership, where it was not ratified, which happens, from time to time. It can be expected. Then there was a delay in the parties coming back to the table for a number of reasons, including there was some turnover in the administration side, both at my level and with Stephanie's. The parties resumed negotiations in the fall, and like I said before, just have not been able to come to an agreement. With the JLMC's involvement, that does sort of put the brakes on things, right? So the JLMC got involved in end of December of 2022, and at that point, the parties just have to sit and wait for them to assign us dates where that they can come and talk to us. So that's been the holding period since December, and like I said, we'll be meeting with them at the end of April.
Thank you, Molly. And then I guess with respect to Chief, you've talked about the recall system and the decreased dependence based on staffing plans. And then I guess the only outstanding question really is with respect to mutual aid dependency in surrounding towns.
So we will always rely on mutual aid going both ways. To answer the question, do we go to other communities more than they come to us? That answer would be, it depends, but yes, in many cases, as other towns start to grow, they're going to rely on us to do that. And just like we rely on other communities to come and backfill us when we get busier because of call volume, because you can never predict call volume. It's not like McDonald's where you can predict when people are going to be shopping and eating and whatnot, and have the right staff to fill in and then let that staff go, an hour later, and cover. So we're a little bit different like that. So, but mutual aid for us to meet the NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association standards. So it's the standards we try to follow in the industry. The standard of 1710 requires us to have 17 firefighters on scene of a fire in 8 minutes. There's no way for us as a community to say that we meet that standard by ourselves in our own silo. We rely heavily on mutual aid. By bringing the standard up, as Travis had suggested, we make the ability to answer that response time faster with that number of staff on shift at all times, and rely less on the number of mutual aid. Right now, we need like 3 companies, mutual aid companies, to come in and support us. As we move forward into the future, if you guys agree with these studies, we'll be able to reduce our dependency, but we're always going to rely on mutual aid. Same thing with the recall. We will always rely on the recall because in a major structure fire, we call out what's known as a box 12, which calls back all active members of our organization to come back to give us a hand to backfill. That's required. Every firefighter that's hired understands that. They're clearly told that and asked the question if they'll be able to come back and support us on recall when I'm doing the hiring process. So they understand that there's a time when they need to be recalled. And that's why we've also put in 48-hour work rules where no firefighter can work longer than 48 straight hours, with overtime, filling overtime or swaps or details or anything like that, to give them the required rest that they deserve from working so hard. So we have a lot of stuff in play that protects our firefighters, and we'll just continue moving forward with this.
Okay, new question from Ms. Sullivan, Kathy Sullivan. Will we see more staff in each station once the fiscal year budget is approved, fiscal year 24 budget is approved? Chief has said we have relied heavily on the mutual aid and recall system that does not work. Is there a plan when will be implemented? I believe you just heard that study will not be presented till the end of May, which will be after we vote the fiscal year 24 budget. I know that we have monies in the budget for what is currently planned, right, Molly and Chris? So I don't know that there's anything more that can be said with respect to what will be in the fiscal year 24 budget, because we are currently in negotiations. Is that fair? Chris, I'm looking at you.
That would be fair, and also we don't have the operational study yet. The town sought that operational study, seeking that outside consultant to review our operations and move forward. Once we have that, that's presented to the board. If once that is accepted by the board, then we will be working off of that study for future years.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, I would entertain a question, or entertain the action, proposed motion.
Sure. I move that the select board authorize the town administrator, Chris Coleman, to proceed with the collective bargaining negotiations with the Westwood Permanent Firefighters Association, Local 1994, IAFF, to implement a promotional opportunity for 4 additional lieutenant positions.
I second that.
A roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Walsh.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
Thank you very much, board.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you, Chris, Molly.
And I want to personally thank you for supporting us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Our pleasure, Chief. Okay, that brings us to the conclusion of new business. We move to the approval of the minutes from both February 27th as well as our March 7th meeting. Anyone have any questions or changes with respect to either of those?
No.
I do not.
Very good.
Okay. So I move approval of the February 27th, 2023 select board minutes as written.
Second that.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Walsh.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
And I move approval of the March 7th, 2023 select board minutes as written.
Second that.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Walsh.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. This brings us to the conclusion. I will take a quick look to see if there are any remaining questions in the Q&A or any hands raised. Seeing none. Our next meeting will be Monday, March 27th at 6:30 p.m. right here via Zoom. So with that, I would.
Excuse me, Rob, is it 6 p.m. or 6:30?
That one's on. It says say 6:30. Is that accurate, Chris? We 6:30. We're a little bit later that night.
Yeah, we're going into FinCom, I think, afterwards.
Okay.
No. Tish, you're on mute.
No, the March 27th will be at 6. I'm not seeing 6:30.
It says that in the
In the packet? No, it's at 6.
Should be 6, I'm sorry.
Point number 11.
Correction, not 6:30, 6 p.m.
6 p.m. via Zoom, March 27th. We will see you all here. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And seconded.
Roll call vote. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Walsh.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. We are concluded. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you again on the 27th.
Mary Ann, thank you for pointing that out. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.